Today's session is on how to use Community to collect data from Twitter threads and from Twitter Academic Product Track. I'm Philip Mai. I'm the co-director of the Social Media Lab. I'm here with Anatoly Gruz, our Director of Research and Canada Research Chair in Privacy Preserving Digital Technology. We're your instructors for today. I just want to let you know, like I said, we're going to be recording. So if you have any questions and so on, you can save those to the end. But if you have questions immediately, you can always add that to the chat room, and Anatoly or Thiago and I can respond there. Okay, some housekeeping stuff I want to go over. The videos and slides in session 1 and 2 are now available online at community.com. Just hit the CSS Bootcamp and you can find the previous 2 sessions there. Our next session in 2 weeks is in 2 weeks. If you need to leave early, no worries. You can watch the videos from today's presentation again at community.com. In 2 weeks, we're going to be focusing on toxicity analysis with the Twitter data that we're showing you how to get today. So today is just about getting data. In 2 weeks, we're going to be focusing on how to take that data and do a toxicity analysis with it. And it will also feature a guest talk by Dr. Paula Vera. She'll be presenting on the result of a forthcoming study examining polarized discourse on Twitter around wearing face masks during COVID-19 pandemic. Also, just as a reminder, we have created a new community discussion group on Google to provide updates about the bootcamp and about upcoming new features in Community. Community is still very new, and we are constantly adding new features, and that's where you will learn about it first. For today's presentation, I'm gonna, because I know some of you are joining us for the first time, many of you, this is your 3rd session, but for some of you, this is your 1st. So I'm gonna do a quick overview of Community again. So I apologize for those who've heard it the previous 2 times. And then we're gonna talk about the Twitter thread data collection and then how to request a Twitter Vera authentication token from Twitter so that you can get data from Twitter via Community. And then Anatoly is gonna go over the Twitter Academic Product Track at the end. So to collect social media data via API, there's usually 2 options. You have to either use a script, which requires programming knowledge and access to computer infrastructure, or you can use a third-party system such as Community, where basically we've done all the programming and you simply just type in your search keywords and hashtag, and the data shows up. For this series, as I mentioned, it's going to focus mostly on how to use Community in an academic setting. Community is a research tool for studying online communities and online discourse. It can collect and extract and analyze and visualize public data from various social media platforms. We designed it so that it can be used by researchers from a wide variety of disciplines. For some researchers, all they want is an easy way to collect the data and then use some other tools to analyze the data. Other researchers are looking for something more comprehensive that they can then also use to analyze the data that was collected. So we try to accommodate every type of user possible with its tool. There are 2 versions of Community, the EDU and the Pro version. The EDU version is designed for students and is ideal for teaching and learning about social media analytics, and the Pro version is designed for academic researchers and is ideal for large-scale academic research projects. The main difference between the 2 versions is the size and the type of data that you can collect. Today, we'll cover the 2 types of Twitter data that you can collect via Community. The first is the Twitter thread. Those are basically public replies to any public tweets posted within the previous 7 days. And the other one is the Twitter Academic Track. That one's only available on the Pro version because, again, the volume of tweet that comes from that version is significantly larger. So as a result, it requires a lot more infrastructure in order to collect and store and analyze all those tweets. Some other features about Community that people were asking about that we really didn't cover the last 2 times. So I want to go over them in more details. Once you have your data from either Twitter, Reddit, or CrowdTango, Community can take that data and and create an Emoji Cloud based on frequently used emoji, and then give you a CSV file of all of the emoji that was found in your data set. It can also create a word cloud, frequently used words, create time series, posts per day, and stuff like that. And it pulls out the top poster, like for example, the top 10. And it provides you with an overview of your data set, like, for example, when the data collection was started, when it ended. So this way, when you're writing up your paper later on, you don't have to go back and remember what you did 3-6 months ago. And it tells you, the total number of records in your data set. The other module that's available in Communinalytic is the text analysis module. Communinalytic, what makes it unique is that it can automatically pinpoint toxic and antisocial interaction using a machine learning API called Perspective, developed by Google. This particular module, because Communinalytic is made up of different modules, you can pick and choose which module you use. So if you're not doing research on toxicity in online conversation, you can skip this particular module and just use the network feature or the text and the other features available in Communinalytic. The other built-in feature in Communinalytic is the network analysis and visualization module. It has a built-in social network analysis module that can render a network with up to 100,000 edges. It can build a reply network, who replies to whom within the conversation. It can build a reply network with toxicity score. So for example, if you did run the toxicity analysis in your data set, it will combine that data with the reply network. So this way you can then visually see within your network where the toxic conversation is happening within the network. You don't have to read each one and identify them. This will pinpoint to you exactly which interaction within this overall conversation is toxic. And also with CrowdTangle and Facebook and Instagram data, it can create a two-mode semantic network. We have a whole tutorial online on what is a two-mode semantic network for those of you who are not familiar. And the other thing is that with this type of network data, you can use it to identify influencers, you can use it to map interests and the spread of misinformation, and you can also use it to detect signs of possible coordination among disparate actors. And lastly, it can also run multiple data collectors. So for example, if you are running your own script, you'll have to have multiple scripts running to collect things simultaneously. But let's say you want to collect data on a particular topic on both Reddit, CrowdTangle, and on Twitter. You can do all three simultaneously for the same time period. And the other thing is that you can also import existing data set as a CSV or gzip CSV into Communinalytic. So if you have an existing data set that you collected earlier or using another platform, you can reformat that and import that into Netlytic to use the toxicity analysis and the network analysis feature. And the other thing is that we include a lot of collaboration-friendly features. So this way, if you have a large team and you are the one that was responsible for collecting the data set, you can share that with your team member without sending large files within the Communinalytic environment. And you can also share your analysis, so this way you can jointly analyze the data set together. So next, I'm going to, if you have any question right now, please feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom. Anatole and Tiago, our tech support RA, can help answer any questions you have there. So this way, because we have a lot of slides to go through. So now I'm going to go over how to collect Twitter thread data, in particular within Communinalytic. When you log into Communinalytic.edu, it will take you to the My Dataset page, which is also your home screen. You will see a blue button that's called Twitter thread. This data collector collects replies or replies to replies in response to any given tweet posted within the past 7 days. The data collector, the thread data collector doesn't collect tweets based on a given keyword or hashtag. So if you want to collect tweets based on a keyword or hashtag, you'll have to use the Twitter Academic Product Track data collector, which Anatoly will cover later. Or you can use our other research tool called Netlytic, which is available at netlytic.org. There are many programs that support collection of tweets on a given topic. Communinalytic, like I said, allows collection and analysis of conversation that unfold in response to a given tweet, such as this one from Donald Trump. So for example, if you're studying influencers or celebrities or fan or gaming communities on Twitter, some of these conversations can, be very long, and many of them attract, thousands upon thousands of responses to a single tweet. And our tools is unique, is that now you can study those threads and study those specific conversations. So instead of studying everything related to a keyword on a topic, here you can focus on one particular conversation and the people who are having that conversation on that topic. Once you collect the data, you'll be able to represent and visualize the replies as a communication network, as illustrated here. You'll also be able to run a toxicity analysis to understand the overall tone of these replies if you choose. But again, like I said, the toxicity analysis is optional. We'll cover toxicity analysis with Twitter data in 2 weeks on June 24th. And then on July 8th, we will specifically cover social network analysis with the data from Community. So to collect replies to a given tweet, first you'll need to locate and provide the tweet URL. So for example, you'll have to use your browser and then find that particular, sign into Twitter, and then find that particular tweet that you're interested to collect data from. So this is ideal for example, fast happening news event, like somebody said or tweeted something that attracts a lot of attention. It could be a movie star, it could be an influencer, it could be a politician. And like, for example, this one generated some of Trump tweets, for example, generate over 20,000 responses. So you can use this tool to then collect the responses to that particular tweet. So after doing this, you're ready to collect the public reply. Let's see. Once you hit the Twitter thread, you simply have to add you enter the name of your data set and specify the URL that you found earlier into the slot right there, and you hit start data collection. And if you did everything correctly, you should be able to see your new data set listed on the My Dataset page. And when your data import is complete, it'll show the number of records, and also you'll be able to access and analyze your data set by clicking on the name of your data set. Once you do, again, this will take you to this screen, which shows you some of the exploratory data, the overview of the data set that you just collected, the word cloud, emoji cloud, top 10, and so on, posters. So now you're ready to collect Twitter threads from Community. And that's it. Quick and simple. No coding required at all. Again, if you have any questions so far, please type it into the chat box. And now I'm going to move on to how to request a Twitter Vera authentication token from Twitter. The Vera token is a randomly generated passcode that Twitter provides to you so that you can add it to a third-party social media analytics system such as Community. This token will allow Community to send secure requests to Twitter on your behalf. It also allows Twitter to know that it's you making the request so that they can track your data's usage cap. When you get a developer account from Twitter, there's a cap on the amount of data you can collect, and that's one way for them to know that how much data you've asked for. So when you go to request this developer account, you go to developer.twitter.com and select the use case. And the two choices that you want to focus on is the academic product track and the standard product track. The academic product track is new. It's something that Twitter launched earlier this year. It provides access to both historical and real-time public tweets for research projects. The cap on that one is very generous, it's 10 million a month, but it requires a more detailed application, and it's harder to qualify for. We have seen and heard of people being denied, but if you're denied, they usually direct you to apply for the standard product track. For most people, the standard product track is good enough for what you want to do. It's the default for most developers, and for those getting started and just building for fun or for consumer or to teach and learn. That one, the cap is 500,000 tweets per month. It's easy to get approved. Once you are ready to apply, go to the apply menu in the top right corner. I want to go over this in detail because there always changing their website and how you get access. So we want to walk you through this but the good thing is you only have to apply for this once, because once you have approval from Twitter to access their data, you can just enter that data, that key into Communalytic, and then you're good to go and you don't have to think about it again. But I'll walk you through some of the main steps right now. So you just go to apply and then go to the academic button there. Approved academic research can gain access to a higher level of data than the standard option, but it requires additional information, as I mentioned earlier. For most of us, I would suggest that you either hit teacher or student, depending on who you are, and then just get started. And then there's an application that you fill out. Once you fill out that application and you are approved, you can then go back to the developer Twitter and sign into your account. And then you just go to the project page and hit new project to start a new project so that you can generate your key that you can enter into Communalytic. The develop portal is where you can also keep an eye on your monthly tweet usage cap. It's also where you can generate access to token called Vera token that you can add to Communalytic so that you can collect data from Twitter. To generate the token, go to the project app section in the dashboard to create a new app to be associated with the project. So the way it works is that you first have to create a project within your develop portal. And then once you create a project, then you can then say, I want to add an app to it. And then you can click on the project name. For example, I call mine project 1 on the left side panel, and then click on add app. Then click on create a new app, and then enter any name for this new app. It doesn't matter what you enter. And then once you do that, it creates these tokens, basically a passcode. You copy the one that's called the Vera token. And then you log back into Communalytic, and then you go to the My Profile section in Communalytic as shown here. And then you paste that Vera token that you just generated from the Twitter developer portal, and you hit submit. And Communalytic will save that key, and then it will use that key every time you use Communalytic to start a new data set to talk to a Twitter API and then pull the data that you're requesting. And that's it. So now I'm going to turn it over to Anatoly, and he's going to go over the Twitter academic product track. Okay, over to you, Anatoly. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Philip. Just want to do audio and video check. Can you see my slides and hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So as you can see, getting this Twitter access token, which is also known as Vera key, may be a bit tedious if you just want to do a class project. So to help especially students, if you're trying to incorporate something like Communalytic in your class, what we did, we have a token for the whole application, Communalytic, which, as Philip mentioned, has a limit of 500,000 tweets per month. So essentially, if you or your students haven't received your own token, Vera token, you're still able to collect replies to a given tweet as long as it's within that 500,000 limit cap that are allocated to the application. And once its limit is kind of exhausted, you or your students will see a note that, hey, we're out of our limit, and you probably want to apply for your own token. And so each token, as Philip showed you, stored within your account, and it's not being used by any other users of the platform. And same with your data sets. So what I will focus today on the second part of this presentation, which focused specifically on this new academic product track that Twitter just launched this year. I divided this part of the presentation in 5 steps. I will talk about this API first, discuss who's eligible based on what Twitter describes to us. Then we'll talk about how do you collect data using this API. We will spend some time talking about how do you build a search request properly to make sure that you're actually capturing relevant tweets. And then once you capture the tweets, we also need to understand what data points are we actually capturing, what metadata elements are part of our data sets. And so we will zoom in a little bit more, looking at some examples of type of fields available. And I saw earlier in the chat room, there were questions about, well, will we know how many times a particular tweet was retweeted, replied, or quoted by somebody else? Yes, we will. And I will show you what columns, what fields in your file to look for. Finally, we'll talk about how do you export the data. And because Communalytic is designed as a starting point of your kind of research journey. So I expect that you probably will use additional tools in conjunction with Communalytics. So you might want to export your data sets. And right now we support the export in the most common format, CSV. I'll talk about that. But what I realized also, because this data set might include some special characters, if you just double click on this exported file, CSV file, and try to open it in Excel, it might be corrupted. So we want to look at how properly to open this file in Excel or other spreadsheet software. And finally, there are some questions that people ask us all the time. How do you share your results? Editors of different journals and peer reviewers also, highly encourage and sometimes require you to include a data set that you use in your publication. So how do you do that without violating Twitter's terms of service? We'll talk about that at the end. And so let me begin by first discussing the eligibility requirements. Who can apply for this academic research product track? As described on Twitter's website, if you're a master's student, doctoral candidate, postdoctoral fellow, faculty, or a research-focused employee at an academic institution, you can apply for this API. And when they say master students, what I understand, it's not necessarily if you are teaching a graduate level course and you have master students in your class who wants to use it for a class project. Their application will probably be denied. So it's really, they keep in mind master students who are doing thesis work or some kind of research project. And so how do you show that you're doing a research project and need this data? As part of the application, you have to describe your research objectives, your research questions, but also Twitter wants to make sure that you actually know what to do with all these potentially millions of tweets that you would be collecting through this new additional API. So they will ask you, what are you familiar with technology, computer programming or other tools that helps you to analyze these large volumes. And so here, if you don't have a computer background, and certainly I don't expect you would, that's why we designed systems like Communalytic. You can actually describe that you're going to be using tools like Communalytic to help you with some data management steps. And the last point, I emphasize that whatever data you collect, of course, you cannot resell, and it's really, you cannot use it for commercial reports or other projects. It's really for your academic research, just to emphasize that. And so I also want to mention that since researchers like ourselves use Twitter for data collection and analysis, we always ask Twitter gods from Twitter to create something like this academic research product track, which would allow us to access historical Twitter data. And so this has finally happened, 10 years or so later, but we now have that venue to access tweets. And I think this is why Twitter will still be relevant as an important source of public opinions and discourse for academic research purposes. So there are two types of data points you can collect: historical public tweets, but you also can use the same API, the same academic research product track, to collect real-time data. Because most of the researchers are interested in more the historical aspect of the data set. Remember how many times you wished you started capturing live data from Twitter before a particular revolution or particular protest or event started that you wanted to analyze. Well, now you don't have to worry about it, because you kind of can retroactively collect some data, of course, excluding deleted and suspended accounts. The volume we mentioned earlier, 10 million tweets per month. So it doesn't mean you have to use it all in one request. You can use it. You can submit as many requests as you want through Communalytic or through other platforms that might be using this API with your access, as long as your maximum monthly cap total number of tweets you retrieve is not over 10 million. If you try to go over 10 million, nothing will happen. It's just you're going to get no more results kind of message. The other important point here is that when you send in your search request to Twitter through this API, you're going to put some keywords, some phrases, and we'll talk about that. But the total length of your request cannot be more than 1,024 characters. So if you have a very long search request that is longer than that, you have to split it in two. And if you are collecting data in real time, which is not applicable to Communalytic, but if you do, they also have a limit in terms of number of rules you can, which essentially search operators you can maintain. I included the link on this slide. You can easily, of course, Google, just search for Twitter Academic Research Product Track to find more information about this API and how to apply. We will share the slide deck on Monday after this session once it's all posted to the website. So all the links will be clickable to you as well. So once you apply to this track and you approved, I applied it as soon as it was launched earlier this year, I think in January, and it took about 1 or 2 weeks. So it was quite quick when my application was approved. I understand that Twitter getting more, of course, applications for this API. So your processing time may be a bit longer, maybe 2-3 weeks, but it's still quite reasonable. And so once you are approved and you go to this developers portal that Philip showed you earlier, now instead of 500,000 cap, you're going to see this progress bar showing you that you have up to 10, you can collect up to 10 million tweets. It will also show you when your cap is reset. So for example, this shows for my account, it shows that this month I've already collected 1.5 million tweets for my research project, but I still have a lot of room if I want to collect more data, and this cap will be reset on June 27th. Similarly to the standard developers token key, you need to tell Communalytic to provide a Vera token key so that Communalytic can collect data on your behalf. And again, this key is only associated with your account. Nobody else will be using your key. The process of generating the Vera token key is exactly the same. And so we're not going to spend too much time on this right now. And then you copy and paste that Vera key to your account in Communalytic, and you're all done. So now, and again, because of the large volumes of data you can collect through this API, unfortunately, right now, we're not able to support this particular API via the EDU track. But in the pro version of Communalytic, you will see additional button called Twitter Archive in round brackets academic track. So that's the button to click to start this data collection for this API. Once you select that option, you will see a data collection form. It's quite simple. You start just like any other data sets. You give a name for your own purposes so you can remember what it was. The second line, text field, is quite important. This is where you're going to enter your search query. And again, it's up to 1,024 characters long. Let's spend more time on this part. What kind of search operators you can use to refine and limit your search queries. But before we do that, I just want to emphasize that the only other two parameters that you will need to enter is the starting point of your data collection and endpoint in the past. Because remember, you're collecting tweets retroactively. So you can say, I want to collect tweets for this starting from Monday till today. You cannot say, I want to collect tweets from today till Friday in the future, because this is, again, only covering historical tweets. But let's focus on this search query, because what happened to me and I hope you don't make that same mistakes. When I first got access to this API, I was so excited. I went to Communalytic in January when we first added this feature to the platform, and I typed very general two keywords. And my time range was quite wide, was a couple of months. And so even though I was just testing, piloting this API, I've collected millions of tweets, which almost used up my monthly quota. But those are not the tweets were precisely, formulated for my research project, so I couldn't really use them. So essentially, the point is be careful. Try to limit time range first for your pilot query, but also spend more time refining it. And so let's talk about how do you find relevant tweets that are well kind of relevant and related to your research questions. I'm also dropping here some links to Twitter's helpful pages where they really spend now more time describing how do you go about building a search query. And we'll cover some of this here with a particular focus on the most kind of useful search operators. Let's start with the Boolean search operators and or, and as well as negation, minus sign. These are very similar search operators that you other information systems support, like Google, for example, but each platform implements them in somewhat a different way. So we really need to know how each platform interprets them, but also what keywords do you need to use to flag to the system that I want to use Boolean and or Boolean or. So for Twitter, the Boolean and, essentially, it could be just an empty single space character between two characters. So if you type root space beer, Twitter will interpret it as the AND Boolean operator. It will interpret that you want to collect any tweets that would include both keywords, root and beer. Because you didn't include quotes around root beer, then Twitter will not specifically look for root beer as a phrase. So it will match phrases like the root makes beer taste fresher. So this tweet includes both keywords, root and beer, but not necessarily as a phrase. Then the second example here, I don't drink root beer. So in this case, it is together as a phrase. But the point is, again, two keywords are joined. So you're only looking for tweets that includes both of the keywords anywhere in the tweet. Now, if you're using a Boolean or, so if you're looking for tweets that include either of these keywords, you have to explicitly tell Twitter that that's what you want to do. So instead of space or and, you want to type or, Boolean operator. And keep in mind, and I notice a lot of my students make this novice mistake that they don't capitalize Boolean search operators. If you don't capitalize or, it will actually treat it as a keyword, as a search keyword. So definitely make sure to capitalize or, and also capitalize and if you're explicitly typing it in your query. So for example, here, root or beer will match tweets like, this tree has a long root. So there's no word beer in the first example, but there is word root in it. So that's why it's relevant. Next, I like my beer cold. So again, the second word appears here, beer, but not the first one, which is fine because we did use the or Boolean operator. The other handy operator, negation, it's when you want to say include certain tweets, but those that don't include a particular keyword. Let's say I want to talk about root, but I don't want to have tweets with the word beer in it. So I will say root space minus beer. And keep in mind, there should not be any spaces between minus and the keyword you want to negate. So as a result, this request will match tweets like root numbers are important in math. So the keyword root is present in the tweet, but the beer is not. Another example that will match this request will be the root of the problem. Again, the root is present and the word beer is not. And again, these are the operators you're going to use as part of your search query when you type in it in Communalytic. All right. Well, to make things more complicated, what happens is that Twitter also just switched late last year, and they launched the new version of this Search API. You probably heard version 2. while still the main version that is most prevalent is version 1.1, and they haven't made any announcement to depreciate it, to expire it at this point. And so you may encounter a lot of systems, platforms, especially for researchers, still use this version 1.1. For example, if you using Netlytic, another platform we've been developing and supporting to work with Twitter data for research, that system still using 1.1 because it's quite reliable API. And in fact, the standard without this academic special access, the version 1.1 gives you more data than version 2. More than, you can collect technically more than 500,000 a month with 1.1. But the point I want to make that as Twitter made this switch from version 1.1 to version 2, they also changed how their search system interprets these Boolean operators and or. So in the version 1.1 previously, what they used, use or was applied before logical and. And I'll show you an example quickly. Which for someone like me coming from more technical background, it was very confusing for me, because usually you learn that you have to apply multiplication, which is equivalent to and first, and only then you apply summation, which is equivalent to or. So now they changed that. They made it more in line with this mathematical interpretation of and or. So they apply an and first, and then they apply an or. So what it means that if you search, if you just type this search keywords, vaccine space COVID or coronavirus. So let's say you want to search for any mentions or tweets that mention, I say either COVID vaccine or coronavirus vaccine or vaccine against coronavirus. So that's what you want to capture. So and you type something like this. Well, if you type it in the web interface, it will interpret properly as you intended it. It will return tweets that include the word vaccine and one of these two keywords, either COVID or coronavirus, in conjunction with vaccine. That's how you would understand it. And that's how version 1.1 Twitter would operate. So it would interpret this search query as, give me all tweets that include word vaccine and either include word COVID or coronavirus. But the new version is more in line with mathematical use of and or. So it will interpret this search query in this way. It will say, give me any tweets that include keywords vaccine and COVID, or any tweets that just say just about coronavirus. See the difference? So essentially, if you just use academic track in Communalytic and you type this, copy and paste this search query without any round brackets, vaccine space COVID, or you're going to actually have a very broad search. It will be about COVID vaccines, but it will also be there will be a lot of tweets just about coronavirus, which is a very broad topic. So be careful with that. We did edit a note about this, the way the Twitter API 2 interprets these Boolean operators directly into the search box. You will see it as a reminder in Communalytic. But if you're not sure, if you're using this or other systems to collect Twitter data, what I suggest, make sure you explicitly use parentheses to group your search operators to explicitly state the way you want your search query to be interpreted. If you use parentheses and quote mark, if you're searching for specific quotes, then it doesn't really matter which version of API you're using. So essentially, you can just impose your order of things. You can just, so in our case, the first version will be vaccine and, or a space instead of and, round bracket open, COVID or coronavirus. So if you just type this into the Communalytic, that's how you can get tweets that mention vaccine and one of these words, COVID or coronavirus. And just to kind of confirm this, not to confirm, but to finish the example, I want to flag that when Twitter does conduct a search, it's actually, it does kind of fuzzy matching. So if you type coronavirus without hashtag, it will include tweets that also includes hashtag coronavirus. So in a way, you don't need, if you are interested in collecting both, when people use the word coronavirus as part of the sentences, but also as a hashtag, you don't need to say coronavirus or hashtag coronavirus, because if you just type coronavirus like this, it will match the hashtag version of it. Same with the word vaccine. And the other interesting point, again, about this fuzzy matching, when you just say COVID, it will also match any numerical, any COVID hashtags, but also the ones that ends with some numbers, or it could be COVID-19. So all you need to say is COVID, and it will match those as well. So it's not gonna change your results if you say COVID or COVID-19, but it's just unnecessary, especially if you are limited, if we know that we are limited by 1,000 characters for the search query, and if our queries tend to be quite long. The final point here, and sometimes it's not obvious, but Twitter actually matches keywords, your search keywords, to a brief description of any links or articles being shared on Twitter. So here's an example that will match this search criteria from a newspaper, and it says, Congress asked Karnataka government to pay hit to its vaccine advisor, and so on. So the tweet itself only includes keyword vaccine. So you might be wondering why it was returned in response to this query that also looking for keywords COVID or coronavirus. Well, what happens that the article was shared from this newspaper included the word COVID as part of the description of that URL, of that link to the article. So as a result, Twitter matched the both. So keep in mind, if you conduct Twitter search and some of the tweets might not include your search keywords, well, those search keywords might have come from those links being shared as part of the Twitter discussions. All right, and another examples of useful operators could be, well, you want any tweets that mention a particular handle. So you just will include that username as part of your search criteria. Just make sure you use @ in this example, Canada. If Canada is a username, it will include any tweets that mention that particular username. If you're just looking to collect replies to a particular user, and this is different from the search that Philip showed. What Philip demonstrated, the Twitter thread, is when you have one tweet and a lot of people just keep replying to this tweet. So it's very similar to forum discussions, threaded forum discussions. So that search that Philip demonstrated will only collect replies and replies to the replies to a specific tweet. But if you just do two and then username, it will include any replies that were posted to a particular user to any of their tweets. It doesn't have to be a single tweet, especially if you're collecting historical data. And same if you're interested in collecting tweets posted by a particular user, you just say from column and then the username. And important part to point out here, when you use to or from operators, you don't use @ before the username. So that's the difference. It's kind of implicit there. And so the other option for you is to filter out tweets by languages. And this is quite important because especially if you're searching for general topics like COVID, coronavirus, pandemic, even though you might be using English spellings of those keywords, people around the world talks about these words. So if you're really interested in specific or have capacity to analyze only certain type of languages, you probably want to explicitly state in your search query what language you can or want to analyze. And so what Twitter did, they support this operator called lang, which stands for language, LNG. And so all you need to do is to add that operator as part of your search. And then you need to indicate the code the identifier for the language that you want to focus on. So if it's just English, you put EN. If it's a French, it will be FR. If it's Ukrainian, it's UK. So this is not to be confused with British English. How do you know what identifiers to use? Well, there's a helpful page. I included a link as well. It's part of Twitter's help page, which again, I'll share with you later. But there are about 70 languages and dialects that Twitter automatically detects. So every time somebody posts a tweet, there's a natural language processing on the back end where Twitter automatically detects the language tweet is written in and assign this identifier. And that helps for future searches by language. Another useful set of operators, this is a bit rarely used, but quite helpful, and it really can help you to refine your search criteria and develop interesting research questions. So you can say, I'm only interested in collecting retweets on a particular topic. So then all you need to do is to add is column retweet to your search query. Or if you're interested in replies, doesn't matter who they replied to, but replies with certain keywords, all you need to do is to add is column reply as part of your search request. And same with quoted text. You can even limit tweets by, if you only analyze in verified accounts, then you just say is column verified. So that will return only tweets in conjunction with your, relevant to your search criteria, any other keywords you entered, but only from users who are verified. And we know that mostly these would be journalists, politicians, other public figures. And we also know Twitter has been redeveloping this verification process and expanding to allow more people to be kind of verified. So it's probably, I would expect, depending when you search using this operator, either today or 6 months from now, your results might be somewhat different. The other operator, and this is really, I haven't seen that in use a lot, and it's relatively new. It's essentially allows you to exclude any promotional tweets. And so what happens is that when you search on Twitter web interface, so using your browser, you normally not going to see promotional tweets as part of your search. There will be ads, targeted ads, but that's kind of not considered part of your search results necessarily. But when you use APIs, apparently some of these promotional tweets, depending how they were entered through their platforms by their advertisers, they may be part of your search results. I'm not sure what's the prevalence of this. I don't think there are that many of them. But if you just want to make sure they're not part of your search results, even if they might be including certain keywords, you just do minus is, so it's a negation. You can apply negation operator that I mentioned earlier, minus, with any of these operators, including the language. So all you need to do is hyphen is or minus is column null cast, one word, and that will take care of it. So here are some of the examples. I won't have any tweets that include hashtag coronavirus in English. Coronavirus, hashtag coronavirus space lang column in space, and I only interested in retweets, so I'll just add is retweet. If I want to have tweets in French that mention hashtag coronavirus, but not replies, I will do the following: hashtag coronavirus space lang FR stands for French space minus is and reply. So this will exclude replies, but will keep retweets, original tweets, quoted text that includes hashtag coronavirus, and they are in French. And final example, if you want tweets that includes English hashtag coronavirus, but the rest of the tweet will be in Ukrainian, which is my home country. That's why I'm mentioning this example. But you also want to make sure you only get in tweets in Ukrainian with this hashtag from verified accounts. Then you want to add is column verified. So that will probably get you tweets from various media organizations, journalists, and politicians from Ukraine on the pandemic, but only those where they chose to use this English English hashtag. All right, a lot of examples. So I definitely encourage you to revisit these slides later on, or read a little bit more before you kind of decide what data you want to collect or starting to collect. So the final example of this operators, I don't want to overwhelm you too much, and we do still need to go through the other 3 steps, which is the metadata, export, and sharing. So just quickly, if you want to limit your search by tweet type, tweet content, you can say, I only want tweets that mention other users. You can use has operator column and then the value mentions. If you want only tweets that include some kind of media file, it could be pictures, GIFs, could be video files, then you say has media. If you only want to tweet tweets with images, you say has images. Only tweets with videos, same, has videos. The other useful feature, if you want only geocoded tweets. So this is a very small subset of tweets, about 1% or less, depending on your search, of tweets from users who explicitly opt in to share their location when they tweet. And so you can say, I only want to collect data where I know for sure the tweet came from a particular geographical location. So here you don't specify which location, all you're saying geocoded tweets. So you can use has column geo. And important note, and this is something in their documentation kind of buried, but I think it's important. It will exclude, if you use has geo, it will exclude retweets. Because what they say, retweet by definition will not be geocoded, because the geocoding is only related to original tweets, replies, or quoted tweets. So as you don't need to say minus is retweet with this one, because automatically it will exclude retweets. Examples. I want to have any tweets that mention either keywords or hashtags, coronavirus or COVID. But I also want to make sure that only tweets that mention somebody else, some other accounts are included. So that's the first example. Note that I use a parenthesis just to make sure that this has mention operator is not automatically attached to the keyword COVID. Remember that whole discussion about the order in which Twitter API 2 interprets and first and then or second. So I made sure that I put parentheses, that making sure that it's either 2 keywords and make sure that it includes username, user handle. Next example will include tweets with hashtag coronavirus that are replies, but without any media objects. So I did minus has media. Because sometimes people reply with GIFs, funny animated GIFs, which is a very interesting form of communicating. But sometimes if you're only focusing on text analysis, like toxicity analysis, those type of techniques are not able to capture sentiments or other aspects of visual communication. So as a result, you may say, well, for now, my scope will be limited to only textual, text-based replies. So you may exclude media replies. Finally, if you want to tweet with hashtag coronavirus, but those that in Ukrainian and those that were geocoded, you say has geocoded. Keep in mind, somebody like me sitting here in Toronto can tweet something in Ukrainian with this hashtag. And if I shared my location, my tweet will be matching this query. So by including has geo doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting people from a certain country. Just again, keep it in mind. But you will see once you collect the data, you will see the columns will indicate the location, the country and city of people who shared their location. So it's not going to include the specific coordinates. Twitter stopped doing that for obvious privacy concerns, but it will have that general details about the country and city. Now, I can expand on that. If you do want to limit your search by a particular geographical location, and again, we're only talking about very small subset of users who did opt in to tweet with geocoding enabled, but there are operators that API version 2 implemented. They're somewhat different from syntax perspective than the ones you might have used for Twitter's search API version 1.1. So some of you might have used or remember Geocode operator that you might have used before. So forget about it. If you're using this academic track through Communalytic or other platforms, and you want to only include tweets within certain geographical areas, your option is to use point_radius operator, where you can specify a circular geographical area to match geocoded tweets that fall within this area. And so the central of this circle will be defined by latitude and longitude coordinates. And then you also need to specify the radius of the location. Keep in mind, Twitter actually now explicitly limits you to only 25 miles radius. And so this is an example. Let's say you want to have tweets, geocoded tweets posted around Times Square. And so what you want to do first is to identify the coordinates for the central of that circle. So you can use something like Google Map or other platforms like GPS-coordinates.net websites. There are a number of them, but I think Google Maps is more kind of easy to use. So you identify a dot at central of the circle on that map. You right-click on that map, and what you'll see, there will be two numbers. So they represent latitude and longitude. So keep in mind, on Google Maps, latitude comes first. In this case, it's 40.75. And then longitude comes next, the second number. And so in general, you know, latitude measured distance north or south of the equator, and latitude measures this distance east or west of the Greenwich kind of area. But the confusion here can happen because the point radius operator, once the latitude number comes first, longitude number comes first, but latitude the second. So you have to remember, if you are using Google Maps to identify these two coordinates, you have to flip them. So latitude first and then longitude second. So in our example of Times Square, you can do search like this one. Give me any tweets that include keyword Trump. I just put an arbitrary keyword space, and then posted within Manhattan area. And then I put point radius operator column, then square brackets, that's important nuance. Then I have latitude minus 73.99 space. Then you have latitude 40.75 and so on space. And then radius, here I put it in 40 kilometers. If you're more comfortable with miles, that's fine. You can just use MI abbreviation. But just keep in mind, any radius you entered should be under 25 miles. All right. So, and just to make you an expert geo-based geocoder search researchers, I want to also introduce the last geo-based search operator. It's called bounding box. So if your location fits instead of circular kind of area, it's better if it's square. That's the operator you want to use. But here you have to do a little bit more work, because you have to identify coordinates for 2 points. Because with the radius, all you need is the central point. Well, here you need to get the what we call west, because it's on the west-south coordinates, label here as number 1. And then you need to have second coordinates, which is east, from where I look, and north corner of that square. And so you use the search operator in your search. And again, if you were looking for tweets mentioning keyword Trump, you'll just say Trump space bounding underscore box column square brackets, and those 4 coordinates that you find either through Google Map or through other devices, websites. But again, make sure that the order of longitude and latitude are in accordance with this operator. And finally, I promise this is the final one. Place_country allows you to limit tweets, geocoded, again, geocoded tweets, but for the whole country. So this is a bit more flexible. And if you're trying to do studies related to cultural differences or policy differences, opinions of Twitter users from different countries, I find this operator, it's very straightforward to use. All you need to know is the identifier, the code for a particular country you want to study. For example, if you want to have geocoded tweets on a particular topic from Canada, you just need to add place_country column CA, a code for Canada, to your search. If from Great Britain, it will be GB, and so on. So Wikipedia, this uses a standardized kind of coding schema from iOS for the country names, for country codes. So there's a Wikipedia page listing all of those codes. Now going to the, I'm going to speed up because I see we only have 25 minutes or so. And so I'm going to just quickly show you once you collect data. So you go through all this process, developing your search criteria, then collecting the data. But let's understand what's actually we are collecting. Because when we think about tweet, or most of the people think about tweets, it's what they see on the website or through their Twitter application, something like text of the tweet or image attached to the tweet. They also maybe see a number of times somebody retweeted or liked a tweet. But when we collect data for research purposes, Twitter API actually gives us more data points to understand and analyze conversations that are happening. So I want to walk you through some of the main data points that have been captured through this API and the points that are available to you once you download the dataset. So let's look at this example tweet from Twitter developers team. And so this is on the left side, this is what people will see in the app or on the website. But if you collect this tweet as part of your data set, you'll have metadata associated with it. So there will be information when it was created to the seconds. There will be identifier, the unique number that relates to this tweet. There will be the text itself, but there will be other data points. For example, if this tweet is geocoded, and in this case it will indicate these coordinates. There's a bounding box coordinates we talked about. There's a country name, United States, country code, and so on. There will be metadata elements, and this is all in this JSON machine readable format. You don't have to understand how or deal with JSON format once you download your dataset from Community. We made it easier by reformatting it in table format, and I'll show you in a second. But this is just to show you that there's also a whole set of variables associated with the user who posted this tweet, and they will be identifier for that user, the screen name, the self-declared location, the URL if they provided any on their profile, how many people they follow or followed back, and so on. And so how do you get to that data? So once you collect data sets, either using Twitter threads, what Philip showed you earlier, or using academic track in Community Pro, you'll see the name of your data set on your My Datasets page, a number of records in these tweets. And so all you need to do is to click this download icon. It will bring you to the page download data set. If the tweet if it's academic track and you have millions of tweets, it's a two-step process because we have to kind of prepare this file for you and archive it. So it's easy, more portable, so you can download it much faster, but it will walk you through the process. But the point is that you're going to get your CSV file on your computer, but your first reaction will be double click on CSV. Well, don't double click on comma separate value files. What you want to do is to open Excel, and you can always use Google Spreadsheet or other programs. The behavior may be somewhat different. Google Spreadsheet actually makes it easier to open any CSV files without the steps I'm going to show you. But the problem with Google Spreadsheet is because this is a cloud-based service, and they can only really handle up to 100,000 tweets, which is okay if you're using just EDU version for Community and collecting smaller data sets up to 30K records. So you can do the Google Spreadsheets. to open your CSV files and analyze it. You don't have to watch these steps. But if you are using academic track and you have a million size data set, and Excel can handle those as long as your computer can. And most of the computers should be okay with that. So open the Excel as an empty spreadsheet, go to data menu. The interface may be somewhat different depending on what version you use, but this is kind of the most common route, data, and then select option from text or CSV files. And this will brings you, you select your CSV file, and this will brings you to this pop-up interface where you can specify the character encoding of your file. Well, because most of the tweets will include some kind of special, or many tweets, I should say, will include special characters or even emojis, you want to make sure you capture them, open them properly. And so here I suggest in the drop-down menu, if it's not selected by default, select UTF-8 Unicode encoded. So this way, this will make sure that it will display most of the emojis properly and other special characters. So then before you click load, make sure to click transform data. So select the encoding UTF-8 and then hit transform data. The reason we want to transform data because the identifiers Twitter uses, this is a very long set of numbers. And what happens that if we open CSV directly without specifying how to treat those very long numbers, those identifiers will be truncated and you will end up having 4 zeros, and at the end of each number, it will corrupt your identifiers. So not advisable. So what I usually do in this transform interface that Excel provides, I either right click on each column with the identifier, like here, tweet ID, your main identifier, but there are some other identifiers like user ID. So I right clicked and I say change type to text. So I want to tell Twitter, hey, don't treat this as a number because I know you can't really deal with such long numbers by default anyway. Treat it as text. And that solve that problem. Sometimes if I'm feeling a bit lazy, I just select all columns by using hotkey Control-A, select all. So this way I change all of the columns to textual representation, just to make sure that if there are any other identifiers later on in this file, they also will be displayed properly. And then once I change that format to text, this interface wants to confirm, hey, do I want to replace this representation in the current file? I'll say yes, replace current. And all is left is to say a file, menu, and then close and load. So because this is a separate pop-up window that Excel gives you, it's called Power Query Editor. So you have to say close and load. It will load the transform data set into your actual Excel. And once it's loaded, make sure to save it as Excel. That's why this way you don't have to repeat steps many times. So once you save it in Excel, then you can easily reopen it without this extra inputting processes. Once you have it in Excel, now you can really get into your data set. So your first row will represent the names, those metadata elements that I mentioned earlier, like tweet ID, date, the text. I quickly gonna walk you through them. We don't have much time to focus on each of them, but I will emphasize a couple unique ones that you need to be aware of. So tweet ID, date, those are expected one. The text column will contain the actual tweet or retweet or reply. Then the name will have a name of the user who posted the tweet or retweet. The username is the handle, Twitter handle. Each user has a unique identifier, will be stored under user ID. Then if this is a reply, you will also see a set of values in reply to, which tweet ID, which user, and which user ID this is in reply to. For example, in this case, this is a reply to a tweet by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and that's what we see here. The actual reply was in English, so this code English. And then you have information like number of times this tweet was quoted, retweeted, or replied, or liked. So you have this 4 engagement values. This reply wasn't popular, so it didn't get any engagement at the time of data collection. Twitter has also applies natural language processing to detect if tweet possibly sensitive in terms of the language is being used. Very small percentage from my experience flagged that way. It's really reserved for extra toxic and so I wouldn't necessarily rely possibly sensitive for research purposes. The toxicity analysis we presented last time and we'll revisit in 2 weeks is much better approach if you trying to look for toxic messages. Then you have a set of attributes, set of columns related to the user profile information. They are self-explanatory. Then you have a set, again, additionally, if it's a reply, you'll have the same set of user profile information, location, self-declared location, when the account was created, if it's verified, how many followers they have, for the account that is being replied to. So remember, this example is a reply to Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. So we know that now we can see that his account is verified. This is his location in Quebec province near the capital. Then his team created an account in 2008. It's not protected. This is how he self-identified himself. So that's all under the in reply to user set of attributes. Source, this reply posted by a user using Android, Twitter for Android. Now, because this is a reply, we get into a number of unique attributes. Reference tweet ID. So this will include unique identifier of a tweet that is being referenced, the original tweet. Then you have reference tweet type. So let's actually get into this value a little bit more. So this is a value that represents whether this is a reply, retweet, or a quote in relation to a previous tweet. So it can have 3 values: retweeted, replied to, or quote. So if it's a retweet, like for example this one, so you have this reference tweet or original tweet by a verified account called CoinMarketCap, and they say, do any of you use @Stimit? If you do, why not give us a follow, and so on. And so another account, you can see, retweeted it, and that's what's captured in our data set. So the value for the reference tweet type will be retweeted. If it's a reply, on Twitter, it will look something like this. You have this, again, the same tweet from the same username. And then another account here, they reply to this tweet, said, I would give you a follow if you sign up on #Hive. And so this reply is captured by my data set anyway. And under the reference tweet type, it will be replied to because it's replying to this reference tweet. If it's a quote on Twitter, it will look something like this. You have a company called Stimit retweeting another user's tweet, but they also edit your quote. So it's kind of retweet with the quote. So then this quote will be part of our record, part of this row. And under the reference tweet type column, the type will be quoted. So that's how you would use it. The other important parameter, it's called reply_settings. And this is a relatively new feature. Essentially, now Twitter allows you, if you post, when you post a tweet, to indicate who can reply to you. So this not as much related to privacy, because this is really about public tweets, but it's more about whether you want to limit maybe hostile replies or you being attacked by others, especially if you think you're posting on a controversial topic. So people can limit that only people you follow can reply to your public tweet, or only people you mention can reply to your tweet. So you can have one of these categories. And so most of the tweets will use the default option, everyone, and that's what you see in the data file. But if they chose any other options, you'll see either following, meaning that only people who follow them can reply to that tweet, or only people who mentioned in the tweet can reply to that tweet. And again, this reply setting only can be specified for the original tweets. If it's a reply or a tweet, you have no ability to specify this value. From the data perspective, if you're looking at the reply or tweet, there will be a value under this column, but it's inherited from what I was able to figure out. It's inherited from the original tweet you're replying to. Finally, the additional two columns, essentially, they're not coming from Twitter API, but we felt it was important to specify whether the record in the Excel spreadsheet is part of related to your search criteria, or if it's an original tweet that has been replied to. Because what happened is that in this new version 2.0 for Twitter API, they return, if you search for tweets, they return you tweets that corresponds to your criteria, but they also return you original tweets as a new set of records that have been referenced. So as a result, you can have a bunch of tweets, not a lot, but some of the tweets that were retweeted or replied to that might have not even included your search keywords, but they will be part of this Excel file. And so we felt it was important to indicate if that's the case. So if you see under the column reference tweet equal to true, it means that it's a tweet that was referenced by another tweet in the data set. So this is an example of a tweet from, again, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and where a couple of days ago he was stating it's hashtag World Environment Day, period. It's a day to celebrate the environment and so on. So this, and I captured replies to this tweet. So even though I only captured replies to these tweets using the Twitter threaded conversations, the API Philip showed you about, I will still have original tweet from Justin Trudeau as part of my Excel spreadsheet. But in the column under the reference tweet, it will be true. It means that, and we added a note just to remind people how to interpret this column. It says, this tweet is included because it was referenced by another tweet in this data set. It may not correspond directly to your search criteria. So it's really up to you whether, depending on what analysis you do, you can just filter out, exclude any rows in your Excel file where reference tweet equal to true. But keep in mind that if it's a retweet, the retweeted record will be part of your data set, but it will be truncated to 280 characters. So if you do want to analyze the full retweeted tweet, you really have to go back to look for it under this under the row where it says reference, where it's actually referenced. So I think it comes essentially the point I want to try to make that understand that you get a lot of metadata fields. Once you download it, really spend time examining columns. If you're still unsure, I know there are lots of content I'm mentioning here, just email us, you know, and we will be happy to help you to figure this out. And final point is people ask, well, can I publish the data set that I just wrote article about? Well, we have to look at terms of service that Twitter provides. And what did they say? You can share it for academic purposes, but only in the form of Twitter IDs. So practically what it means that if you downloaded the data set from your community account, following the steps I already showed you, and you have it in Excel file, all you can share is this first column, tweet ID column. So you either can copy and paste it into the new spreadsheet and then attach it to your article. So that's the practice that Twitter allows us to use to share it publicly. So you are not allowed to share the full data set. Of course, it's different if you're working with collaborators on your team. They would need to access to your data set. But this is, we're talking about public sharing of the data set. Well, you ask me, well, what's the use of just sharing a bunch of tweet IDs? Well, what other researchers can do to validate or reuse your data set, they can use other programs like this one, Hydrator, which essentially takes a file with a list of Twitter identifiers, and then it recollects automatically. It will recollect all of the tweets that you've used. The process called rehydrating, so you kind of add in water. The only limitation, the main limitation of this approach, of course, if some of the tweets were deleted between when you analyzed it and when they were recollected, they will not be part of the data set. So it's not going to be a perfect copy of your original data set, and that's the limitation. And so you can find this type of data sets that includes tweet IDs across different websites and data repositories, like this one here showing you a repository with over 100 data sets with over 5 billion tweets. But again, it's not the actual tweets, it's Twitter IDs that you still have to recollect. I personally like to publish data sets in repositories that gives you the DOI, unique identifier number. This way it's easier to track and reference a particular data set. For example, in 2 weeks, when we talk about how do you apply toxicity analysis to Twitter data sets, we will look at the case of Donald Trump's tweet last October when his account was still active. And he tweeted about the fact that he was diagnosed with COVID. And he actually received nearly 300,000, just think about it, 300,000 replies in 2 days, 300,000 replies. And so we have a blog post describing how we analyzed it. We're actually going to go through some of those steps, and we'll show you how you can use other tools like Jupyter Notebook and Python script, existing Python, to analyze something like that, the data set collected via Community. But the actual data set we shared on Dataverse repository, which generates this DOI number, which you can actually cite and reference. And this is the data set that only includes tweet IDs, as well as any columns that we added to our analysis, like toxicity scores. So it doesn't include the actual text, but it has the scores we use for the analysis. So at least there is some way for people to replicate. And this is it. And I think we have about maybe 5 minutes for your questions. I will stop the recording. I see some questions came in through the chat room, and I see Tiago and Philip were able to address. But if we not answered your questions yet, please feel free to use your mic. I'm going to stop the recording and we can have a Q&A session.